Hello everyone, happy feast of St. Charbel. I'm not even gonna try to pronounce his last name. I'm Max and welcome back to Aquinas Every Day. So today we will be continuing with question 1, article 2 of part 1 of St. Thomas's Summa. So today, whether sacred doctrine is a science. We proceed thus to the second article. Objection 1. It seems that sacred doctrine is not a science, for every science proceeds from self-evident principles. But sacred doctrine proceeds from articles of faith which are not self-evident, since their truth is not admitted by all. For all men have not faith, 2 Thessalonians 3:2. Therefore, sacred doctrine is not a science. Objection 2. Further, no science deals with individual facts, but this sacred science treats of individual facts, such as the deeds of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and such like. Therefore, sacred doctrine is not a science. On the contrary, Augustine says, De Trinitate 14:1, to this science alone belongs that whereby saving faith is begotten, nourished, protected, and strengthened. But this can be said of no science except sacred doctrine. Therefore, sacred doctrine is a science. I answer that sacred doctrine is a science. We must bear in mind that there are two kinds of sciences. There are some which proceed from a principle known by the natural light of the intelligence, such as arithmetic and geometry and the like. There are some which proceed from principles known by the light of a higher science. Thus, the science of perspective proceeds from the principles established by geometry, and music from principles established by arithmetic. So it is that sacred doctrine is a science, because it proceeds from principles established by the light of a higher science, namely, the science of God and the blessed. Hence, just as the musician accepts on authority the principles taught him by the mathematician, so sacred science is established on the principles revealed by God. Reply to objection 1. The principles of any science are either in themselves self-evident or reducible to the conclusions of a higher science, and such, as we have said, are the principles of sacred doctrine. Reply to objection 2. Individual facts are treated of in sacred doctrine not because it is concerned with them principally, but they are introduced rather both as examples to be followed in our lives, as in moral sciences, and in order to establish the authority of those men through whom the divine revelation on which this sacred scripture or doctrine is based has come down to us. This concludes Article 2. Today again, St. Thomas is talking about science and whether sacred doctrine is a science, the answer being yes. As we saw before yesterday when we talked about science, that science is any human activity seeking after knowledge and ordering that knowledge. And so that is something we're doing when we're studying sacred doctrine, sacred theology. We're trying to order knowledge. But he talks about where we get that knowledge. And that's something really interesting because in his view, all sciences, they either have their own self-evident principles or they're based on something higher, that there is actually a hierarchy of science, that it's all interconnected. But what's really interesting is that sacred doctrine, he's saying, that higher science is namely the science of God and the blessed. And I think what he means there is, we would be thinking, what is the science of God and the blessed? The first thought might be, well, it's theology. That's the science dealing with God and the things of God. But no, here he's talking about that. The science we're talking about here, sacred theology, sacred doctrine, all of that, is based off a higher science. And that higher science, I think what he's getting at is the knowledge of God himself. Is based on the knowledge of God has of himself and all things. That it's what's God revealing from his kind of innermost being. And that's pretty awesome. That when we're doing theology, we are trying to, as much as we can, put into a rational order those things that God has given to us so that we are rightly understanding them. Because what he gave us is his own knowledge of himself and in himself all things. And that is an immense gift. And some people might say that what can reason do with that? Well, God told it to us and gave us reason. So of course, he would expect us to apply our reason to it. It's not that we are going to discover everything, because we can't. It's God. I mean, we can barely discover everything about physical particles. There's no way we're going to get to God in the totality of everything. But we can touch upon it, especially because he came down and touched upon it first. In that sense, we can know something, and it is good for us to do this kind of studying if that's what we're called to do. If it's not, we can rely on other people. That's fine. But if it is, then it's good to start wrestling with it. So that's all for today. Thank you for joining me again today. If you would like to continue with me on this adventure, I invite you to subscribe below, and please comment with any thoughts you have. I hope to see you tomorrow. Remember, Aquinas a day keeps the heretics away.